My own flesh and blood, my daughter, thought she could betray me in the worst way imaginable. I saw her sneak that white powder into my soup, her hands trembling, thinking I was too old, too weak to notice. 25 years in the Marines, surviving ambushes and betrayals in war zones, only to come home to this? A knife in the back from the one person I'd give my life for. It's not just the poison that burns, it's the cold, calculated lie in her eyes, the same eyes I used to read bedtime stories to. I swapped the bowls in silence, turning her trap against her. But the rage inside me is roaring. How could she? Why would she? If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, you'll want to know what happens next. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment with your city, and let's dive into this story of deception and justice. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound I'd taken in Fallujah. I'm Rob Hawkins, a 8-year-old retired Marine, living alone in a modest 500 square foot ranch house on the edge of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. My walls are lined with medals from 25 years of service, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and faded photos of better days. My wife, Ellen, passed from a heart attack 5 years ago, leaving a void no mission could fill. My daughter, Hannah, was my last anchor, but she drifted away 8 years back, chasing dreams I never understood. Last month, she showed up unannounced, dragging 2 suitcases and a hollow look in her eyes. "Just need a place to crash, Dad," she mumbled, barely meeting my gaze. I opened my door, hoping to rebuild what we'd lost, but something felt off, like the eerie calm before an ambush. This town, 10 miles from Fort Bragg's main gate, is a haven for veterans. My neighbors, mostly retired grunts like me, swap war stories at the local VFW hall over beers. My garage holds my old service rifle, cleaned monthly out of habit, a reminder of the discipline that kept me alive. But Hannah, she's changed. She avoids my questions, spends hours on her phone, whispering behind closed doors. Last night, as I polished my boots in the living room, I caught her staring at the safe where I keep my pension papers. "You okay, kiddo?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Fine, Dad," she said, her voice flat, eyes darting away like she was casing a target. That look, it wasn't my little girl. It was the look of someone planning something dark. My Marine instincts kicked in, whispering danger. I didn't survive 3 tours to ignore that feeling now. The air in my Fort Bragg home felt heavy, like the moments before a sandstorm in Iraq. I'd survived ambushes, IEDs, and firefights, but nothing prepared me for the enemy within my own walls. Hannah's return had stirred something uneasy, and now, 3 weeks into her stay, the signs were impossible to ignore. She was no longer the girl who'd clung to me during thunderstorms. Her whispered phone calls, late-night pacing, and that cold, calculating stare, they were signals of a threat I couldn't yet name. My Marine training taught me to trust my gut, and right now, it was screaming that danger was close. Last Tuesday, I'd felt the first real warning. After a simple dinner of grilled chicken and potatoes, a sharp pain tore through my stomach, like shrapnel ripping through flesh. I stumbled to the bathroom, gripping the sink, sweat dripping onto the cold porcelain. Just bad food, I told myself. But the pain was too precise, too sudden. It wasn't food poisoning, it felt like sabotage. I checked the fridge later, noticing the expiration dates on everything were fine. But a small, unmarked vial tucked behind the mustard jar caught my eye. It was empty, but the faint chemical smell lingered. My heart sank. Had Hannah done something to my meal? I pushed the thought away, hating myself for suspecting my own daughter, but the seed of doubt was planted. The next evening, I watched her closer. Hannah offered to cook, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager trying to impress her mom. "Let me make you something special, Dad," she said, her smile tight, like she was reading from a script. Just some soup to warm you up. Her hands moved quickly over the stove, too quickly, as she stirred a pot of chicken noodle soup. I stood at the kitchen doorway, pretending to check my phone, but my eyes were locked on her reflection in the window above the sink. That's when I saw it. Her hand slipped into her pocket, pulling out a small glass vial, no bigger than a shotgun shell. A white powder poured into my bowl, her movements practiced, deliberate. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a mistake. My daughter was trying to poison me. "You sure you're okay, Dad?" Hannah asked, her voice dripping with false concern as she set the steaming bowl in front of me. I forced a nod, my mind racing. "Just tired," I said, studying her face. Her eyes didn't match her smile. They were too bright, too eager, like a predator waiting for the kill. I remembered her at 16, storming out after a fight about her reckless friends. "You don't get me, Dad," she'd screamed, slamming the door. Ellen had been the glue holding us together, and without her, we'd fractured. Hannah left at 18, cutting contact except for sporadic texts. Now, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, I saw a stranger wearing my daughter's face. The pain from Tuesday haunted me as I stared at the soup. My military instincts kicked in: assess, adapt, survive. I couldn't confront her yet. I needed proof. "Forgot the salt," I said, standing up. As Hannah turned to grab it from the counter, I glanced at the window again. Her reflection betrayed her, a quick, nervous look at my bowl, confirming my fears. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. My own daughter was waging war against me in my own home, a 1,500 square foot battlefield I thought was safe. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, each second amplifying the tension. I sat back down, my hand steady despite the storm in my chest. "Smells good," I said, forcing a smile. "You always knew how to cook." Hannah's shoulders relaxed, but her eyes stayed sharp. "Eat up, Dad. It'll make you feel better." Her words were a trap, and I was one step ahead. I thought of Ellen, how she'd taught Hannah to make this same soup when she was 12, giggling as they chopped carrots together. That memory clawed at me, but I pushed it down. The Marine in me took over. Emotions could wait. Survival came first. I needed a plan, and fast. My safe in the garage held more than pension papers. It had my old field notebook, where I'd started logging Hannah's odd behaviors. Late-night calls, her sudden interest in my VA benefits, the way she'd linger near my desk. Tonight, I'd add this moment to the list. The soup sat untouched in front of me, steam curling like a warning. Whatever Hannah was planning, I'd be ready. I'd faced enemies before, but none had ever carried my blood. The kitchen clock ticked like a countdown to a detonation. My daughter, Hannah, sat across from me at the worn oak table in our Fort Bragg home, her eyes locked on the steaming bowl of chicken noodle soup she'd placed in front of me. The faint chemical smell from that unmarked vial I'd found in the fridge haunted my thoughts. 25 years in the Marines had taught me to read a battlefield, and this 2x1 5-foot kitchen was no different. My pulse stayed steady, but rage simmered beneath my calm facade. She thought she could outsmart me, her own father, a man who'd survived ambushes in Fallujah. I wasn't just going to sit here and eat her poison. I'd turn her trap against her. "Looks delicious, Hannah," I said, my voice level, betraying none of the storm inside. I lifted the spoon, letting it hover over the bowl, watching her reaction. Her lips twitched into a smile, but her eyes were sharp, expectant, like a sniper waiting for the shot. "You used Mom's recipe, didn't you?" I added, probing. Her fingers tightened around her own spoon. "Yeah, Dad, just like old times," she replied, her tone too sweet, like she was selling me something. I remembered Ellen teaching her to cook this soup, their laughter filling this same kitchen. That memory stung, but I buried it. This wasn't about nostalgia, it was about survival. I needed an opening to make my move. "Could you grab some bread from the pantry?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the bowl. Hannah hesitated, her gaze flickering to my untouched soup. "Sure," she said, standing slowly, as if weighing her options. The moment she turned her back and stepped into the pantry, 10 feet away, I moved like I was clearing a hostile room. 3 silent steps to the counter, my hand swapped the bowls hers for mine in less than 5 seconds. The poisoned soup now sat at her place, the steam curling innocently. I was back in my chair, spoon in hand, before she returned. My heart pounded, but my face stayed calm. A skill honed in war zones where showing fear could get you killed. Hannah emerged with a loaf of white bread, her smile forced. "Here you go, Dad." She set the bread down and slid back into her seat, oblivious to the switch. "Eat up before it gets cold," she urged, her voice carrying that same false warmth. I nodded, taking a small sip from her bowl clean, safe, just like Ellen's recipe. The broth was warm, comforting, but it couldn't ease the ache of knowing my daughter wanted me dead. I watched as Hannah lifted her spoon, her movements casual, confident. She took her first sip, then another, her eyes flicking to me, waiting for me to react. She had no idea she was tasting her own poison. Minutes passed, the only sound the scrape of spoons against ceramic. My training kept me focused, scanning her for signs. Then it happened, her hand paused mid-air, her face paling. A bead of sweat formed on her forehead, and her breath hitched. "You okay, kiddo?" I asked, mirroring her earlier concern, my voice steady but laced with steel. She forced a smile, clutching her stomach. "Just a little warm in here," she mumbled, her eyes darting to the window, then back to her bowl. She didn't know yet, but I could see it, the poison was working, just not on me. I leaned back, my chair creaking under my 200-pound frame. "Maybe you should slow down," I said, my tone calm but pointed. Hannah pushed her bowl away, her hands trembling now. "I'm fine, Dad," she snapped, but her voice cracked, betraying her. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed, marking the moment her plan unraveled. I'd outmaneuvered her, but the victory felt hollow. This was my daughter, my little girl who'd once saluted me in her pajamas, mimicking my Marine drills. Now, she was an enemy in my own home, and I just turned her weapon against her. I stood, gathering my bowl as if nothing was wrong. "I'm heading upstairs to rest," I said, watching her struggle to maintain composure. "You should too if you're not feeling well." Her eyes widened, a flicker of panic breaking through her mask. "Yeah, maybe," she whispered, gripping the table. As I climbed the stairs, each step heavy with the weight of what I'd done, I knew this wasn't over. Hannah's betrayal was just the beginning. My field notebook in the garage would get a new entry tonight, every detail of this moment, logged like a mission report. I'd survived her first strike, but I needed answers. Who was pulling her strings, and what would they try next? The stairs creaked under my boots as I climbed to my bedroom, each step heavier than the last. The weight wasn't from my 200-pound frame, but from the crushing truth that my daughter, Hannah, had tried to poison me. I'd outsmarted her, swapping the bowls in that Fort Bragg kitchen, but the victory felt like defeat. My own blood, the girl I'd raised, had turned against me. I shut the bedroom door, the lock clicking with a finality that echoed in my chest. The 10 by 1 2-foot room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a bunker under siege. I sank onto the bed, the springs groaning, and stared at the nightstand where Ellen's photo smiled back at me. Her warm eyes, frozen in a 5 by 7 frame, seemed to ask, "How did we get here, Rob?" I reached for Ellen's old perfume bottle, its glass cool against my calloused fingers, 5 years since her heart attack, and I still sprayed it on her pillow sometimes, chasing ghosts. Hannah had been 23 then, her grief raw and wild, blaming me for not saving her mom. "You were always gone, Dad," she'd screamed, her voice cracking in this very room. I'd been on deployment when Ellen's diagnosis came, and by the time I got home, it was too late. I tried to bridge the gap with Hannah, but my Marine discipline order structure pushed her further away. At 18, she'd packed her bags, leaving only a note: "I need to find my own way." For 8 years, I'd clung to the hope she'd come back whole. Instead, she returned with poison in her pocket. The pain wasn't physical anymore, not like the shrapnel-like agony from Tuesday's tainted meal. This was deeper, a wound no Purple Heart could honor. I'd taught Hannah to shoot a .22 rifle at 12, her small hands steady under my guidance, her laughter bright as we aimed at tin cans in the backyard. "You're my hero, Dad," she'd said, saluting me with a grin. Now, that memory felt like a lie. I pulled open the nightstand drawer, fishing out an old photo from 2009. Hannah, 12, in pigtails, standing beside me at the Fort Bragg 4th of July parade, waving a tiny American flag. I'd been in my dress blues, proud as hell to have her by my side. My fingers traced her smile, and a tear hit the photo, blurring her face. How had my little girl become a stranger? I stood, pacing the hardwood floor, the 15-foot length barely containing my restless energy. My field notebook sat on the dresser, filled with entries about Hannah's odd behavior, whispered calls, her questions about my VA benefits, that vial in the fridge. I grabbed a pen, scribbling the night's events. 21:30 hours, Hannah added white powder to my soup. Swapped bowls. She showed signs of distress, sweating, trembling. Writing kept me grounded, a habit from years of mission reports. But no report could capture the ache in my chest, the betrayal that cut deeper than any enemy fire. I'd faced death in Iraq. But this? This was my own flesh and blood choosing money over me. "Why, Hannah?" I whispered to the empty room. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Was it greed? Desperation? Someone else pulling her strings? My pension, my 1,500 square foot house, my life insurance worth maybe $300,000 total, were they enough to turn her against me? I thought of Ellen, how she'd always known what to say when Hannah's teenage rebellion flared. "She's just finding herself, Rob," she'd say, her hand on mine. Without her, I'd fumbled, my orders sounding like lectures. Had I pushed Hannah to this? The guilt gnawed, but my Marine instincts fought back. I'd survived by trusting my gut, and it told me this wasn't just Hannah. Someone was behind her, someone who knew how to exploit a broken daughter. I stopped at the window, the Fort Bragg street below bathed in moonlight. The neighbor's flagpole, 20 feet tall, stood proud, a reminder of the brotherhood I'd found in the Marines. Those men would have died for me, and I for them. But Hannah, she'd chosen to kill me. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, the pain swelling until it felt like my chest would crack open. I'd lost Ellen, and now I'd lost Hannah, not to distance, but to betrayal. The girl I'd raised was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd poisoned my soup. I straightened, wiping my eyes. Grief could wait. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Tomorrow, I'd call an old Marine buddy turned private investigator. Whoever was behind this, they'd face the full weight of a man who'd never backed down from a fight. The dawn light crept through my bedroom curtains in Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. I hadn't slept. The image of Hannah's trembling hands as she clutched her poisoned soup haunted me, but grief was a luxury I couldn't afford. My Marine instincts demanded action, assess the threat, gather intel, neutralize the enemy. Hannah wasn't working alone. No way she'd turned into a cold-blooded schemer overnight. Someone was pulling her strings, and I needed answers before they struck again. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mike Sullivan, a former Marine buddy turned private investigator who ran a small office 5 miles from Fort Bragg. "Mike, it's Rob Hawkins," I said, my voice low but firm. "My daughter tried to poison me last night. I need you to dig into her life now." Mike's office was a cramped 10 by 10 foot space in Fayetteville, cluttered with maps, surveillance gear, and a faded Marine Corps flag on the wall. He leaned back in his chair, his weathered face grim as I laid out the evidence. The unmarked vial in the fridge, Hannah's late-night calls, her sudden interest in my VA benefits, and the white powder she'd slipped into my soup. "This ain't just a family spat, Rob," Mike said, scribbling notes. "Sounds like someone's coaching her. I'll start with her phone records and known associates." I nodded, my jaw tight. "Find out who's behind this, Mike. I want names, motives, everything." By noon, Mike called me back. "You're not gonna like this," he warned. "Hannah's been running with a guy named Daniel Carter, a low-life con artist who preys on veterans' families. He's got a rap sheet fraud, identity theft, real estate scams. Been working Hannah for 3 months. My stomach churned, not from poison but from rage. "What's his angle?" I asked. Mike's voice hardened. "Your assets, your house, your $300,000 life insurance, your pension. He's done this before, Rob. 2 years ago, he conned a Navy vet in Raleigh out of his home. The guy ended up homeless." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "Where's Carter now?" Mike paused. "He's local. Meets Hannah at a diner off Bragg Boulevard. I've got recordings." Mike sent me the audio files, and I listened in my garage, surrounded by my old service gear, cleaned rifles, folded flags, a reminder of the brotherhood I trusted. The recordings were chilling. Daniel's voice, smooth and predatory, instructed Hannah, "Use the digoxin, just a pinch. It'll look like a heart attack, like your mom's. No one will suspect." Hannah's reply was hesitant but compliant. "I just want this over, Daniel. He's got so much and I get nothing." My heart sank. She wasn't just betraying me, she was planning my murder for money. The recordings revealed more. They'd already contacted a shady realtor to sell my 1,500 square foot house the moment I was gone, a cash deal with no questions asked. I drove to the diner, a rundown spot 2 miles from home, to see for myself. From my truck, parked 50 feet away, I spotted Hannah and Daniel through the grimy window. He was lean, with slick-back hair and a fake smile, his hand on hers as he whispered. She looked nervous, her eyes darting like a recruit before her first mission. I snapped photos with my phone, my hands steady despite the fury boiling inside. "You're messing with the wrong Marine," I muttered, my breath fogging the window. Back home, I added the photos to my field notebook, logging every detail. 1,300 hours, observed Hannah with Daniel Carter at diner, planning asset liquidation. Away. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back off, old man, or you'll regret it." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just Hannah's betrayal anymore, it was a conspiracy. I called Mike again. "They're escalating," I said. "Got a threat from an unknown number." Mike's voice was grim. "Carter's desperate. His debts are piling up $50,000 to some bad people. He needs your money fast." I paced my living room, the walls lined with photos of Ellen and Hannah, now mocking me. "What's their next move?" I asked. Mike didn't sugarcoat it. "They'll come for you, Rob. Carter's got a history of getting violent when his scams fail. I'm digging deeper, but you need to lock down your house." I spent the evening fortifying my home like a forward operating base. New deadbolts on the doors, motion sensors rigged to my phone, and my old service pistol cleaned and loaded, tucked in a drawer. The VFW hall was just a mile away, a place where I could call on brothers who'd have my back. But this fight was mine. Hannah and Daniel thought they could break me, but they didn't know the man who'd survived 3 tours. I sat in my armchair, the weight of betrayal heavy but my resolve heavier. They'd come back, and when they did, I'd be ready. My notebook lay open. A new entry added, 2100 hours, received threat, preparing for hostile engagement. The war was on, and I wasn't losing this one. The moon hung low over Fort Bragg, casting jagged shadows across the abandoned training base 3 miles from my home. The 50-acre sprawl of rusted barbed wire and crumbling bunkers was where I'd honed my skills as a Marine 30 years ago, running drills under the North Carolina stars. Now, it was my chosen battlefield. Mike Sullivan's intel had confirmed Daniel Carter and Hannah were coming for me, armed with forged documents to steal my 1,500-square-foot house and $300,000 in assets. The threatening text, "Back off, old man, or you'll regret it," still burned in my mind. I wasn't backing off. I'd lured them here, texting Hannah from a burner phone. "Meet me at the old base. We'll settle this." My trap was set, rigged with motion sensors and floodlights I'd scavenged from my garage. No Marine worth his salt walks into a fight unprepared. I crouched behind a concrete barrier, my old service pistol tucked in my belt, its weight familiar after years in war zones. The night was still, broken only by the distant hum of Highway 24, a mile away. My phone buzzed, motion sensors tripped 200 feet out. They were here. Headlights cut through the darkness as Hannah's beat-up sedan rolled into the clearing, gravel crunching under its tires. She stepped out first, her face pale but hard, followed by Daniel Carter, his lean frame radiating menace. He carried a sleek black pistol, its barrel glinting under the moonlight. "Come out, old man," Daniel shouted, his voice sharp, like a predator taunting prey. Hannah clutched a manila envelope, forged papers, no doubt. "Dad, just sign the damn documents," she called, her voice trembling with desperation. I stayed silent, my pulse steady, trained for moments like this. I'd rigged the base like a forward operating post. Floodlights wired to a car battery sat 50 feet away, ready to blind them. Speakers from an old radio were hidden in the brush, set to blare a recorded siren loop. I pressed the first remote trigger, and the floodlights snapped on, bathing Daniel and Hannah in harsh white light. They flinched, shielding their eyes. "What the hell?" Daniel barked, raising his gun blindly. I hit the second trigger, and the siren wailed, a piercing scream that echoed off the bunkers. Hannah stumbled, dropping the envelope, her hands flying to her ears. "Dad, stop it!" she screamed, panic cracking her voice. Daniel spun, searching for me, but I was a shadow, moving 20 feet to a new position behind a rusted Humvee frame. "You thought you could scare me off my own land?" I called, my voice booming with the authority of a drill instructor. "I've faced worse than you in Fallujah." Daniel fired a wild shot, the bullet pinging off concrete 10 feet from me. "Sign the papers, Hawkins, or you're done," he snarled. I could see his confidence fraying, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. Hannah's face twisted with fear, her hands shaking as she picked up the envelope. "Dad, please, just do what he says," she pleaded, but her words felt hollow, stained by her betrayal. I'd taught her to stand tall, not cower behind a con man like Carter. I crept closer, staying low, my boots silent on the dirt. My plan wasn't to fight, it was to delay until my backup arrived. Mike had tipped off a local sheriff, a former Marine who drank with us at the VFW hall a mile from town. I'd given him the coordinates and a heads up about Daniel's gun. "You're out of moves, Carter," I said, my voice steady as I triggered the siren again, louder this time. Daniel cursed, firing another shot into the dark. Hannah dropped to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't want this," she cried. "He said it'd be easy." Her confession hit me like a punch, but I pushed it aside. Emotions could wait. Blue and red lights flashed in the distance, cutting through the night. The sheriff's cruiser roared up, 100 feet away, tires screeching. "Drop the weapon!" Sheriff Tom Reynolds bellowed, his service weapon drawn, flanked by 2 deputies. Daniel froze, his gun wavering, then clattered to the ground as he raised his hands. Hannah collapsed, tears streaming. The envelope crumpled in her grip. "Rob, you okay?" Tom called, his voice steady. Marine to Marine. "I'm good," I replied, stepping into the light, my pistol still holstered. "Got it all on camera." I'd hidden a trail cam 30 feet up in a pine tree, recording every word, every move. Tom cuffed Daniel, who spat curses as he was shoved into the cruiser. Hannah looked at me, her eyes pleading, but I turned away. "You chose this," I said, my voice cold. The trap I'd set wasn't just for Carter, it was for the daughter who'd tried to kill me. As the deputies secured the scene, I felt the weight of my old base around me, a place where I'd learned to fight for what mattered. Tonight, I'd fought for my life, but the war wasn't over. I needed to know how deep this conspiracy ran, and I'd take it to court if I had to. The courtroom in Raleigh, North Carolina, 40 miles from my Fort Bragg home, was a sterile battlefield of wood and steel. The American flag stood tall behind Judge Clara Bennett's bench, flanked by a framed photo of a Marine in dress blues, a nod to the veterans who filled this region. I sat in the witness stand, my 200-pound frame steady despite the storm in my chest. 3 weeks had passed since I'd outmaneuvered Hannah and Daniel Carter at the abandoned training base, their threats and forged documents captured on my trail cam. Now, I faced my daughter across the 30-foot courtroom, her eyes downcast, her hands cuffed. Daniel sat beside her, his slick suit failing to hide the defeat in his slumped shoulders. My evidence recordings, photos, the digoxin vial was laid out before the judge, a testament to their betrayal. This was my last mission, to ensure justice for every veteran they'd targeted. The prosecutor, Emily Ward, a sharp woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, called me to testify. "Mr. Hawkins, describe what happened on the 12th of October, she said, her voice echoing in the 20 by 40-foot room. I leaned into the microphone, my tone steady, honed by years of giving mission reports. My daughter, Hannah, slipped digoxin into my soup, thinking I wouldn't notice. I swapped the bowls, and she took the poison herself. Later, she and Daniel Carter broke into an old training base to force me to sign over my house and $300,000 in assets. I recorded everything, their threats, their plan to make my death look like a heart attack. The courtroom was silent, the weight of my words sinking in. Hannah's head dropped lower, her blonde hair hiding her face, but I saw her shoulders tremble. Emily presented the evidence. Mike Sullivan's audio files of Daniel coaching Hannah, my photos from the diner, the trail cam footage from the base. "This shows a calculated conspiracy to murder Mr. Hawkins," she said, holding up the vial, its white residue glinting under the fluorescent lights. Digoxin, a heart medication, was used to mimic a natural death. Daniel's lawyer objected, claiming the recordings were inadmissible, but Judge Bennett overruled. "North Carolina is a one-party consent state," she said sharply. "Mr. Hawkins had every right to protect himself. I caught Tom Reynolds, the sheriff who'd arrested them, nodding from the back. His Marine background made him a brother in arms, and his presence grounded me. Hannah's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim, manipulated by Daniel. My client was coerced, he argued, gesturing to her. She acted under duress. I wanted to believe it, to see the girl who'd saluted me at 12, but her voice from the recordings echoed in my mind. I just want this over, Daniel. She'd chosen this path. When Emily asked if I had anything to add, I looked directly at Hannah. I raised you to be strong, to fight for what's right, I said, my voice low but firm. You chose money over family. You broke my trust, and you broke every veteran you targeted with him. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Hannah's eyes met mine, wet with tears, but I held my gaze. This wasn't about forgiveness, it was about accountability. The judge reviewed the evidence, her face unreadable. The court finds Hannah Hawkins and Daniel Carter guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted poisoning, breaking and entering, and fraud, she declared, her gavel striking like a rifle shot. Hannah was sentenced to 7 years in state prison, eligible for parole in 5. Daniel, with his history of scamming veterans, got 12 years, no parole. As deputies led them away, Hannah turned to me, her voice barely a whisper. "Dad, I'm sorry." I shook my head. "You're sorry you got caught," I said, my words heavy with finality. Daniel glared, his eyes promising revenge, but the cuffs on his wrists told a different story. I stepped out of the courtroom into the crisp Raleigh air, the 15-story building looming behind me. Emily followed, her briefcase in hand. "You did the right thing, Rob," she said. "This wasn't just about you, it was about stopping Carter from hurting more veterans." I nodded, but the victory felt hollow. My daughter was gone, not just to prison but to a choice I couldn't undo. The Marine in me had won the fight, but the father in me mourned the loss. I drove the 40 miles back to Fort Bragg, my truck's engine humming steadily, unlike my heart. The evidence was airtight, the justice served, but I wasn't done. I'd make sure no veteran faced what I had. The fight for my brothers wasn't over, it was just beginning. The Raleigh courtroom faded behind me as I drove the 40 miles back to Fort Bragg, the weight of Hannah's conviction settling like dust after a firefight. I'd lost my daughter, not to prison, but to her own choices. My 1,500 square foot house, once filled with Ellen's laughter and Hannah's childhood dreams, felt like a ghost town. I sold it within a month, donating the proceeds $300,000 to the local VFW to fund a program protecting veterans from scams like Daniel Carter's, Season After FAFC, the local VFW. I moved to a quiet retirement community in Tampa, Florida, 600 miles south, where palm trees swayed and old Marines swapped stories over coffee. My new home, a modest one, 200-square-foot bungalow, sat among neighbors who'd walked the same paths I had, men and women who valued honor over greed. I volunteered at the Tampa VA hospital, teaching veterans to spot financial predators, sharing my story to shield them from what I'd endured. The betrayal stung, but it forged a new mission: protect my brothers and sisters in arms. Hannah sent a letter from prison, begging forgiveness, but I filed it away, unopened. Some wounds don't heal. The lesson I learned was hard-won family isn't just blood. It's the people who stand by you, who'd never poison your soup. Trust your instincts, because they're your first line of defense. If this story hit you, please hit that like button, drop a comment about what family means to you, and subscribe to join me in honoring the strength of veterans. Your support keeps these stories alive.